Hello, all. This is Urta Wanderer, again from the wilds. I am here today with our great General Lizard Wizard to talk today about the basics of list building. How are we doing, Wizard?
I'm doing rather well. How are you holding up?
Eh, despite everything, doing okay. Alrighty, so what exactly are we starting with today?
Well, we have some audience questions from Lustria Online.
Fair enough. Pulling them up. Why are Seraphon your favorite army?
Ooh.
I know it's a big one.
So, yeah. Uh, the answer is the old battle tome. Um, I saw the Skink Starseer model once upon a time when I was looking to fill out an order for web store exclusives.
Mm-hmm.
And so I threw that on my cart and picked that up as well. Uh, just because I love the model. And then I was looking for a new army anyways, and I started looking into Seraphon, and they played unlike anything else in the game. So that was what hooked me into them was the way our army started playing after the General's Handbook. I think it was 2017. Uh, that got me into Seraphon, and now I just love them in general. Like I miss the old book, but I still like them. Like they're still my army. I play other things, but this is my main for sure.
Fair enough. For me, I was much a fan of the lore long before I was capable of playing, either lack of store or lack of funds, and I fell in love with mainly the story of the Slan destroying the moon during the old times. But
Mm-hmm.
from there, it branched off into everything else in the Lizardmen lore, and the models were really cool. And so when I finally jumped in, I did so to Lizardmen because they were just the army that grabbed my attention the most. Unfortunately, this was at the peak of when they were really, really bad.
Yeah,
So, what'll you do?
back when you summoned by casting spells.
Yes, yeah, it taught me to be a very, very good player
Hmm.
and an okay painter.
Yeah, I was lucky when I got into Seraphon and wanted to start playing them competitively. The new summoning system had just come out, so we were no longer casting a spell to summon a specific unit. And it was at the start of second edition where summoning no longer cost match play points to do. Uh, so I kind of came into the scene sort of when, at least from my perspective, no one else really knew what the army was capable of.
Mm.
So I was able to take this underrated army that everyone thought was a joke and start getting some actual wins with it. And that's what got me addicted to the army. Like I would show up at an event, and then everyone's like, "Oh, whatever, Seraphon, haha! I thought this was a real tournament,"
Mm-hmm.
and then beating them. That was super fun.
Yep. To be
Uh,
fair, that was the point where we were strongest.
oh, for sure, yeah.
Before all the other armies got their really big power
Hmm.
boosts during 2.0.
Yeah, yep, yeah. Right at the start of 2.0, we were insane, and almost no one knew
Yep, except old hats like me and very talented people like you.
it.
Fair enough. Do you play any other armies regularly?
Yeah, so my my three favorite armies for Sigmar are Seraphon, then Skaven, and then Beast of Chaos.
Really?
Uh, I own too many armies, uh,
Many of
like
us
an
do.
embarrassing amount of armies, and I have a bad habit of like not building a list, but just collecting the army and then building lists out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I've spent way too much on Warhammer. If I didn't like work at a place where I got a really good deal on it, I would be broke. Um,
I think that's true of
but
many of us.
yeah, yeah, those are my three favorite army. Skaven, I like more now that Plague Monks got nerfed because they made it really unfun to play. Like you just put both types of death frenzy on them, and you buff them up, and it doesn't matter if you charge, if they charge, like whatever. Anything that touches them, they're killing.
It was very point
Um,
and click, yes. kind of like
Yeah.
early Terrorgeists or Daughters of Cain.
Yeah, exactly like that. So I love the aesthetic. I love the fluff. The fluff for Skaven, I might even like more than Seraphon, which is a big ask. But I just love the personality of the Skaven.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then Beast of Chaos, I've always liked. I think their models are super cool. And now I feel like they're the army that plays the most like old Seraphon used to play.
Yes, they're also
Um,
very board control, very movement
mhm.
based.
Yep, yep. And you can do one drops with them, very cheap and effective one drops with them in terms of battalions. Um, it's dying with purpose, like that's how you play the army. So it feels a lot like old Seraphon.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And all their rend is useful now.
yeah, yeah, yep.
All right, last question for today. We have one about the
Oh,
three
what other
dreads.
armies do you have, or do
Oh,
you only have the one?
I only have one other, and it's cities. I
Ah,
and again, it's a lore and models army. I
mhm.
didn't know how good it was when I jumped in because I ordered the book before we got to see it. I love Demigryph Knights. I think they just look cool.
They really do. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea of men standing against the end of the world, not because they're particularly talented or well built for it, but because it's the right thing to do and they have families standing behind them.
Yeah, it's really their only choice. Like, well, I guess I'm a monster hunter now.
Hmm. Yeah, it's not so much futility as a sense of duty and standing against the end, which is why I like them. It's why I like line troops in general, which is why I
Mm.
tend Saurus over anything else.
Hmm. Hmm.
I just like holding the line. I I like last stands. I like the speech in Mass Effect 1, hold the line.
Yeah, yeah.
That.
Nice.
A lot of my armies are based off of that type of sentiment. And later I found out, oh crap, this thing is amazing.
Yeah, they've got a lot of cool tools.
Hmm. But yeah. Anyway, back to question. We have a question about the three Dreadsaurian list with Starseers, Three Skinks, and the big boys. Uh, the person who asked knows it isn't competitive, but wants to know how much fun you personally would have running it, and if so, how you would run it.
Uh, I feel one. I think it'd be super fun.
Hmm.
Uh, but I feel like that's a list you have to tell your opponent you're going to play before you play it.
Oh.
Um, like for me, it's not something I would just show up at an LGS with and be like, "Here's my three Dreadsorians and that's my army" type thing. Um, because neither of you are gonna have fun unless I feel like you're both.
Both on
Um,
board with it?
yeah, because one, if it wins and it's like an actual competitive list you're playing against, you're going to win because you steamroll them.
Right.
Uh,
You
that's
hit
the
you
only
hit
way
them
you're going to win
early
with
and
it
you
against
knocked
them.
them off the table.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you either get an alpha strike or their dice flop on them or whatever. Like you're going to steamroll them if you're winning with that list. Uh, so that's not fun for them if they weren't expecting it, and they're going to feel a bit cheated or a bit like a gotcha type thing.
Hmm.
Um, and you're probably not going to get a good game out of it unless, like, for you, in terms of like actually having a meaningful first three turns of the game instead of it being over right away.
Right.
Um, if they're not willing to like play to the game with you. Um,
Yeah,
but I
it's
think
it's
it's super
something you
cool.
set down on the table to have fun. Not
Yes.
not
Yeah.
because you're trying to win, not because I mean, I don't know. I honestly wouldn't have very much fun with it at all. The Dread Saurian is just too fat.
Yeah, that's one of the issues. So I feel like how you make it um, good, for lack of better words, uh, is you have to be very patient. Like you have to just accept that you're you've only got so many like viable options for each Dredge Saurian as far as where it can go, and you're going to have to wait for the right moment to go to those places,
Hmm.
and hope that your opponent doesn't just block you out from going to them. So, like, if I were going to play this list, one of the things I would do is be like, "Hey, do you mind if we play on like an open plain battlefield and we just like throw some scatter terrain on?" That type of thing. That's why I say it's something like both opponents need to be on board for.
Hmm.
Um, However, in terms of objectives, you can hold objectives with it. The base is big enough
That they
that if
can't
you
hold it.
position correctly,
Yeah, they
you
can't
can make
get
it.
to into 6 inches.
Yeah, they have to be on 25s in order to get more than one model within 6 inches. Um,
Yeah, and that's one of the big, big problems with monsters. They cannot hold
yeah,
objectives.
yep.
You, it's
But I think it would be fun to do. Like if I were going to run a three dread Saurian list, I would probably run it more of like get two friends. I'm going to play three dread Saurians. You each have 1,000 points, and you're going to play Monster Hunter and see if you can kill these dread Saurians. Like that type of a thing. It's
okay.
something I would
So
use more for narrative.
yeah, hmm. It's an unfortunate thing, but yeah, I think that's where he and a lot of other monsters his size get relegated to,
I think you can make one dread Saurian competitive. I just don't think you can make it more competitive than if you put those points into skinks.
or anything else for that matter.
Yeah.
Fair
Yep.
enough. Well, as I
I mean, I
alluded,
would rather one dread Saurian than two Stegodons.
fair. He is more durable than they are, and he will do more damage,
Yep.
except for the hyper-tuned one skink tree chief build, which
Yeah. Yeah.
is sinking a lot of eggs into one basket.
Agreed. Agreed.
Well, fair enough. As I alluded to earlier, we're going to start a few episodes where we talk about the basics of list building and the building blocks of a good army.
Yeah.
So where do you want to start with that?
So I'm going to walk through sort of the same process that I go through how to build a list.
Mm-hmm.
And there's sort of two things that you have to consider. They're a bit meta and heady, but one of them is battle plans.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, in general, my advice if you want to get better at the game, study the battle plans. The battle plans are what actually win or lose you games.
They have a much
Um,
bigger effect than most people give credit for.
yeah, and it's way easier to study the battle plans than it is to study every single battle tome. Um, so, study the battle plans. Um, and that's really what it is balancing battle plan and battle tome. Those are the two major features that change the meta of the game when a new battle tome comes out, or when the new general's handbook or the new edition comes out and shifts the way battle plans are played.
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
so I always start from like a battle plan perspective. Like I think of what are the 10 battle plans that I pretty much always see in tournaments, and how is this list going to be able to play those battle plans. um, and how do I find units that fit the roles that let me win those battle plans? Uh, Seraphon, if you're building lists specifically for Seraphon, I feel like there's a lot of give and take. We're not very good at building a true all comers list
Right.
where we can perform well on all battle plans against all battle tomes.
Granted, we don't
Um,
have a battle. A We don't have one that we just auto loses for us like Stormcast do with total commitment.
oh, yeah, yeah.
But we
Um,
don't have a whole lot that we're really strong on anymore either.
yeah, Battle for the Pass, I think, is still probably one of our best ones. And that's always been really good for us.
Mm. And at least
Um,
a few of our old ones, like the two where you have to kill the other battle line in
mm,
order to take it, Duality of Death.
yep.
Yeah, at least those ones don't completely knock us out of the game.
Yeah, they used to be really rough for us, but with the new battle tome, I think Duality of Death got easier for us.
Mm.
Um, but I always try and consider battle plans because fundamentally this game's won through objectives, uh, and it's a fixed turn game, so it's 5 turns,
Mm-hmm.
always 5 turns. And so, generally speaking, if you can solve how do I win 3 out of 5 turns holding more objectives, and it doesn't work for all battle plans, but it works for most of them, um, then you've won the game. Uh, and there's a couple of different tools to go through. How do I feel like I've achieved winning 3 out of 5 turns? Um, Understanding if you need to win the first three, if you need to win the last three, like understanding that type of a balance helps you better design a list around being able to play the predominant battle plans. Because there's some battle plans that I've just never seen in a tournament. Um,
Oh.
like the blood, the first one in the core rulebook. Like I've never seen that. Um,
I haven't
and there's
either.
some other
That's
ones
weird.
that I pretty much never see. Same for relocating orb, but that's because the old relocating orb was an awful battle plan in
And
terms of like,
yeah, and
yeah,
both of them are really annoying to play.
yep. The new one I actually like. I if I were to write a another like if I were to choose the missions for a future tournament again, I might put relocating orb in it just because I like that it stays in no man's land, and I like that it incentivizes going second, like choosing to go second
Uh
more.
huh.
So I don't know, it'd be something I consider clean, but I'm getting off topic.
Fair
Um,
enough.
so the main things that I consider for building a list is how am I going to score more objectives than my opponent for 3 out of 5 turns. Um, and what do I need to be able to do that? Am I trying to kill them off of an objective? Am I trying to be unmovable from an objective? Am I trying to just trap them somewhere and get free reign of objectives? Like, how am I
Alpha
doing that?
pin.
How aggressive am I being on the table? Um, and so trying to balance that, like, you don't want to have an army with super fast hammers. That's your main focus, but super slow supporters because you're not going to do well.
Right. Especially with
Like
our
you'll
army.
have one turn, that's cool. Uh, so
It
just trying to keep those
yeah.
types of things in balance.
Unless like a few armies you can completely hobble somebody in one turn, you want to be able to keep your power pairs together.
Yeah, yeah. So that's something I think about a lot with list building in general.
Mhm.
Um, but it's always comes down to like whenever I'm choosing a unit, whenever I'm thinking about what other units to add in, whenever I'm trying to decide what my list is missing, it's always how does this help me score and make it hard for my opponent to score.
Right.
And there's a couple of like every war scroll for the most part is different and relatively unique. Like there's not normally a clone of that war scroll somewhere. That's not always the case. Um, Sometimes it's just a reskin of the same unit, basically.
Right.
But a lot of units fall into a singular overarching grouping, sort of. Um, in broad terms, you have hordes. Um, Normally, hordes are piddly on their own. Like if you just had one marauder, he's going to lose one chaos warrior every time.
Right.
Some hordes are better, some hordes aren't. And then you have sort of your standard. Um, like I would say a good example of a horde would be marauders. A good example of a standard unit would be like your chaos warrior.
Where there's a
Um,
lot of them, but not to the same extent. You aren't just
yeah,
seeing a bunch of blocks of 40
yep.
or
And those
30.
same units, whether or not like they're horde or just a standard, or whether that horde now becomes chafe instead of a horde, like those are all varying scales on those same units.
Hmm.
Um, and those matter, like understanding when you want to take 10 skinks as chafe versus wanting to have 40 skinks as a horde. Um, like all of that comes into play in terms of how they're going to interact with objectives.
Yeah. 10 mans are much easier to lose. They can waste
Mm-hmm.
damage. They're easier to move around. 40s are always easier to buff, which is one of the
Yeah.
main strengths that hordes and large units have.
Well, and I think something that I've seen in terms of good list building that's different between experienced players and novice players uh, is things in your army are going to die. Um, if you're going
Learning
five and
to let
zero in an
go.
event, you're not going there without having picked up a model off the table. So you want to have things in your army that you can let die, because this is like I said earlier, it's a 5 turn game. So having a 10 man unit of skinks that cost you 70 points, if they die and they take away one of your opponent's 5 movement turns for their main unit,
Hmm.
you just reduce the effectiveness of that unit by 20%. Um,
For 70 points, which is
for
really good.
70 points.
This
Yeah.
is
So
often the job
understanding,
that anvils perform, not by just dying quickly, but not dying fast at all.
yeah. So I guess I got a bit ahead of myself because one of the major things, and this just comes down to style of how I play. I play a very movement oriented game.
Hmm.
Um, Most of my decision making is not how do I gain turns, but how do I steal turns.
Yep.
Um,
How do you waste your opponent's time? You play very cagey.
yeah, and I sometimes that involves playing highly aggressive, um, and it'll look like you're throwing away a unit. Um,
Yeah, that was the main skink horde strategy back in our old book.
yeah, well, and I used to do that with Ripperdactyls too. Like our old book, people are like, "Oh, Ripperdactyls, like they do a lot of damage."
Kinda.
Uh, but when I would, yeah, moderate. They got
They
less and less and
did a
less as
lot of
saves got
damage
better.
until everything got better.
Um, but even then, like they were still perfectly capable of killing a lot of scary things, just not more tech guard. Um,
Or any of the other really good hammers nowadays.
yeah, very true. Uh, but I liked them more because I could drop them 3 inches away and tie you up.
Hmm.
So people were like, they're afraid, and so like they hide their stuff and they surround it with a screen and all that stuff.
They
And they're
play
like, haha,
really
charge my
tight.
screen. And then I'm like, yes, I will absolutely charge your screen because it's going to take you 3 turns to gain position again.
And you forgot
Um,
that your screen is slower than the rest of your army because it's not a good one.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But again, that's getting more into the very specifics.
Mm,
But in terms of like broad generics, units fill basically three roles in my mind. Not talking about heroes and support,
right.
but just things that get supported. They're either not dying, dying, or blocking. Um,
You don't have a killing roll?
I don't worry too much about killing. I don't find I actually generally need to kill units. Like you still need to kill units at a tournament because you're trying to
Reduce their ability to hurt you.
yeah, and you need kill points at a lot of events.
Right.
Um that's frequently the tiebreaker. A lot of the events I go to, you have like major victory, uh, minor victory, draw, major, minor for defeat. That's the main decider. Then you have like hidden objective, and then you have kill point frequently. Um, so kill points do matter for that. Like you want to kill stuff, but it's not normally my primary concern, um, unless I'm thinking about specific meta matchups. So at the moment, and I'll actually save that and get into this later. But you have to know what's the best armies in the game, what are the most prevalent, what are the gatekeepers, and you have to have a plan to beat those gatekeepers with whatever list you make if you're trying to win an event.
Fair enough.
Um,
So back.
but those are sort of those three roles. Like, am I trying to make a unit that can die for me, a unit that won't die, or a unit that can block and throw off my opponent?
Fair enough.
Sometimes a unit not dying is because it's really killy, though. Um, like the reason Kroxigor aren't going to die when I send them into Plague Monks is because I'm going to kill the Plague Monks.
Fair enough.
Um,
What do you look for when you're looking for a unit to die? Is it just that they're cheap?
yeah, it's normally that they're cheap. That's pretty much always it. They either need to be cheap or they need to be low advantage for my opponent when they kill them. Um, so pterodons are actually a unit that's great for dying. Um,
Because they do their work in the first move
yeah,
and that's it?
exactly. Yeah, they do their work right out the gate. They're super fast. Um, so your opponent like needs to deal with them while they're point blank, or they won't get to deal with them because you'll just run away and then keep doing other things.
Right.
They've got a big base, a moderate wound count, and they don't have a good enough save that I'm expecting them to stay around. And they're cheap.
No, they do
Uh,
not.
90 points for 9 wounds is actually pretty good. Um,
Yeah, that's about standard with most armies, light
yep.
infantry.
It's their 6+ save that makes them sort of brittle. Um, but yeah, pterodons are a great unit. If you want a unit that you can throw away, that's pterodons. They do their trick, they drop their mortal wounds, and then they just are annoying for your opponent, and your opponent has to go out and kill them.
Mm.
Um, as
Another,
long as you're competent with their movement.
yeah, so that is what I generally call a missile unit. We have a lot of those where they're made to do really powerful damage and then die.
Hmm.
And I often treat salamanders like that just because they can hit exactly where I need them to, and being able to save them is isn't as is really hard,
Yeah,
but
that's
it's a
true.
much more expensive roll. But usually you don't do that for them specifically to die. You do that to take out a key piece of your opponent's army and probably
Yes,
die during it.
yes, that's true. It's normally a trade, like you're trying to
Mm.
trade up, and you're just accepting that it's a trade.
So it doesn't
Um,
just have to be cheap, as long as it can do more than its cost and then die is what you're looking for.
yeah, and like that 10-man unit of skinks is perfect. Like I was describing earlier, where you can effectively rob a unit of 20% of its effectiveness.
Hmm.
Um,
Just by standing in a place.
yep. A unit of an example I don't want to die is a 40-man blob of skinks. That's something that what they're going to accomplish for me in the game is by
Hmm.
them staying on the table.
And
Um,
continually chipping at people. Or
yep.
just standing on an
Uh,
objective.
yeah, or screening a zone like 40 bodies. That's a lot of bodies on 25 millimeter bases.
Hmm.
You can do a lot to soak up area to deny enemy play. Um, and so that's why like you will want to have some units that you want to be able to throw away. It's just a bonus if they can do like that missile as well.
Right.
Um, so that's what I would say makes a unit that's good to have a unit that you want to die.
Fair enough.
Um,
How about a unit that you don't want to die? How do you look for units that do that?
um, normally it's something that I want. Those are normally the like wrench that I want to stick in my opponent's gear. Like it's not just something that's going to get there quick and take one action away from them. It's protracted. Like I want to stop their whole cogs from turning for multiple turns.
Okay.
And the best way to do that is with good saves. Um, like at the moment in the current meta, just the way it shakes up, it's largely good saves or bad returns from your opponent. Like 60 stabas, that's just not worth killing. Um, so then if you can put them in a situation where they need to kill it, you draw a bunch of enemy resources.
Okay. So putting a unit that's hard to take off the table in a disadvantaged position.
Yeah, anytime you can gain action economy out of the game, and sort of in more simple terms, stabas without any buffs, just as they are, even if you take spears instead of katas, they're not going to do a lot of meaningful damage, which is to say, they're not going to kill an enemy hammer in all likelihood, unless it's a bad hammer. Um,
Or just a really brittle one,
yeah.
like how plague
But,
monks used to be.
yeah, yeah. Most hammers, most like Death Stars, most even the scary things that an enemy has, if you set those stabas up under the correct circumstances, like you get the negatives to hit them
Yeah, the minus
and
four
all
to
that
hit.
stuff. Yeah, all that stuff, you get it going. It's not worth killing that unit. It's going to take your opponent too many turns
Hmm.
and too much resources to kill them. So anytime you can bring that kind of a unit and you understand how to play it to force them to have to try to kill it, um, that gives you huge action economy benefit. Because
Yeah.
there's not really much in the game that can just do it on its own. They're going to have to put multiple things into it.
Yeah. Gits are actually one of the few tar pits armies nowadays, with everything killing so hard.
Mm, yeah.
Yep. So what doesn't make a good durable unit? Like, is there anything you like that's a trap that you don't want to fall into when looking for something that just doesn't die?
Yeah, so a great example of it is the Bastillodon.
Oh,
Um, it it doesn't want to die. Like it's really good at not wanting to die.
true.
But if you get unlucky, it's going to die real quick.
Oh,
So I would rather something that is predictable. I want to have a good feel for how long I'm going to be able to delay whatever, like how long I'm going to be able to stick it to the table. Um, so a lot of times bodies help. Uh, Even if you're like 60 bodies with a 5-up save, you can have a good understanding of this is going to be in combat with this unit for 3 turns. before they kill clean of it.
Uh-huh.
Um,
I mean, 60 wounds, even on a bad save, is a lot more than 8.
yes.
And
I,
especially earlier
yeah,
with the Gits example, if they're hitting on 6s, it doesn't matter how bad your save is. Your defensiveness
yeah,
is in the fact that they can't hit you.
yeah, 100%. Yep. Um, so I tend to favor those things. Like the Bastillodon's super durable. I think it's something like if you put the re-rolling save rolls of one, it's like 181 damage attacks before you're gonna be able to use your end on it.
Yes.
Um, yeah, that's absolutely insane. Until you think of witch elves, um,
Yeah.
or plague monks, or crypt ghouls, like those things that can do 180 attacks. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Or
so
just a single overcasted magic bolt.
yeah, yeah. The other issue that I have with that type of a unit, normally when I want something that's not going to be able to have the opponent pick it up off the table quick, I want to be able to envelop. Like if I want to send my net to catch you, I want it to actually catch you. I don't want you to just be able to sidestep it.
And just run
Um,
away.
yeah, exactly. So that's the disadvantage as well. That's the double disadvantage that like the Bastillodon has. I've got no way to make you fight him.
Right.
Um,
He's pretty easy to ignore, and he's because he doesn't do a whole lot of damage,
yep.
and he's not fast enough to force an issue. And like
Yeah.
you said, you can just run from him.
Yeah. So some of the things I'm looking for, a predictable rate of death, basically, like how long is this unit going to last?
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to have a good feel for that. Um, I want to be able to take up a lot of table surface area. Um, it doesn't have to be like individual units. Like Croxagore can take up a lot of table. You've got 12 Croxagore, that can take up a lot of table.
Yeah, that can take up
Um,
like 2.5 feet
yeah,
if you
yeah, you can
string them
take
out.
up a ton of table. Um, and there's all sorts of other weird patterns you can do with how you place bases and stuff to soak up space and have coherency and make movement a headache for your opponent. In terms of like pinning units models between them so they don't have space to retreat and all sorts of other stuff. But anyways, so I'm looking for surface area. Like how can I control how my opponent is going to have to interact with the frontage of the unit,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then I'm looking to be able to hold an objective. If I have a unit that I want to be able to stick to the table, I really want it to be able to control an objective. It doesn't have to be able to control an objective because you can just stop them from getting to the objective, but you have way more tactical flexibility if it can control an objective.
Mm. The
Um,
best way to do this is to make a circle 6 inches out from the objective point.
yep.
That way they
Uh,
can't just walk in and steal it.
yeah, and you want to hang your like you have to understand the way bases are going to honeycomb.
Mm-hmm.
So you always want, if you're trying to do this, you want the equator of your base to be just on the outside edge of 6 inches away from the center of an objective. Um, and then ideally, you want to create enough internal surface area with a unit when you're doing this on objective,
Mm-hmm.
which our club has colloquially started referring to it as haloing objective. Um, I try to make more of like a wagon wheel. I want spokes inside of it. There's enough things that have fly. Uh,
That can just hop over.
yeah, and generally that won't matter, right? Because
Right,
it's like sure it
because
can fly and hop over, but it's 6 inches, it's 25 millimeters. I'm on the outside edge. I've probably got 15 to 20 models on it.
yeah, and
Um,
most flyers aren't large units except for Night Hunt, but they're the
yep.
outlier.
But in this in general, like the ability to halo an objective, is something that I always want at least one of my units, if I can manage it, to be able to do. Because if you do it correctly, it will take a minimum of 2 turns for any opponent to take that objective from you,
Mm-hmm.
which means you only have to find one extra turn of usefulness out of it in order to get that 3 out of 5 turns.
And for that, you need bodies, not just for the objective
Yes.
count, but in order to be able to set up a position like that.
Yes. Yep. So that's what I'm normally looking for with like units I don't want to die. It's not necessarily that 3+ save re-rolling with a 6+ or 5+ save after save, like Mortec guard type thing. Like that's great. That's a unit
Mm-hmm.
that's really hard to kill. Not as big of a deal as it was 6 months ago, but still,
Yeah, 6 months ago, nothing could have removed that.
Yeah, but now our army can be like, I killed the Galthazar Harvester and the 30 Mortek in one turn. Your go. Um, like,
uh, Granted,
yeah,
there are
it's
only really 2, 3 armies that can do that.
yeah, and I think it's pretty cool that Seraphon. I feel like I feel pretty comfortable um, with Seraphon being able to kill a Galthazar Harvester and 30 Mortek in a single turn.
Mm.
Uh,
I mean, if you really push for it, or you just don't and outspeed them because they're slow.
yeah, and we're fast. But I will say OBR gets a rep for being slower than they actually are.
True, they
They
move.
pretty much always have the ability to add 3 inches.
Mm. So they have a standard move of 7 if they spend their resource on it, which isn't what
Yep.
they want to do, but what they can do. The
Yeah.
the main
And
problem is they just can't run and take 6.
yeah, that's their big slowness. That's what slows them down.
Yeah, because our
Uh,
skinks can move 14 like that.
yeah. Yep. Uh, so yeah, those are sort of the three major battlefield roles that I'm always looking to. And then after that, I tack on other things. Like if I have a unit that I don't want to die, that I'm wanting it to be able to hold objectives, that I'm
Actually, we
wanting
skipped
it.
one of your original 3. We didn't talk about what you look for in a blocker.
Yeah, yeah. So blockers can come in a couple of fashions. Um, they can either be like what I would consider an active blocker, like this is a unit that you literally stick in the way of your opponent, and
Hmm.
it's a speed bump. They have to walk over or around it.
That's where our 10
Um,
man skinks would go.
yep, exactly. 10-man skinks. And there's other units that do that more through soft power, which is to say the enemy doesn't want to engage them, so they have to stay away from them.
The original Gits
Um,
build?
Yep, exactly. Original gets built. Which is why Hand of Gork or Hand of Great Green Hand, whatever their spell is,
Yeah,
that's the
it's
same
Hand of
thing.
Gork.
Hand of Gork. That's where that's an important ability because it lets you negate the fact that your opponent wants to do that. Um,
Fair enough.
so
Would
yeah,
would
you.
things that slow down your opponent, like Cornish demon princes, work for
Uh-huh,
that?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Corn Demon Princes are perfect for that. Um, you can uh, one, they're a 3+ save, so that makes them pretty sticky to the table. They've
Mm-hmm.
got a decent sized base, and then their command ability, blood, gore slicked ground, blood slick ground, whatever
Yeah,
it is.
the one that cuts
Uh,
all movement in half.
yeah, super awesome. Same for like the warp lightning vortex, the
Oh, that's where a lot of endless
soul
spells would go,
snare
wouldn't it?
shackle. Yeah, exactly. Um, so a lot of times that sort of soft blocker is an endless spell. It's not necessarily a unit.
Yeah, like that's
Um,
where like Grave Tide would go because it just has a really big base. Things like
yep.
you said, the shackles that just slow people down by a lot.
And purple sun. If you've got a unit that's really tough and the enemy
Oh,
has a purple sun where you want to send it, well, now you can't unless you can dispel it. Like it's just not worth
dispel it or
sending it
just
in.
take it to the face because
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, it's not a
Um,
perfect deterrent because a lot of armies can just take it to the face, but
mhm, yep.
yeah, that would work
But
a lot. It doesn't have to just be in the way. It has to be, like you said, something you don't want to go near.
yeah, yeah. So that's sort of what I'm looking for with blockers. The second one is way more fun and way less conventional, and it's normally something that your opponent hasn't necessarily cognitively prepared to be part of the game before it is.
Hmm.
So I feel like you end up with a lot of surprise factor, and a lot of times I found that opponents will make a mistake regarding it.
Yeah,
Um,
you want to do your best to throw your opponent off his game.
yeah, yeah, you want to make them play your game. Um,
Yep,
So at some point, I'll probably next video I'll do like the questions I ask myself before I make any decision.
fair
Um,
enough. You also were talking about secondary roles that you want to put on the main 3.
yeah. So the secondary roles, this is where like I start thinking about damage. Like, what do I want this unit to be able to kill? Um, do I want something that's more utility based? That's where I start looking for those things. Uh, like the old Engine of the Gods, I really liked because it was great bait. Um, so you're able to get a lot of people, in my experience, to overextend to try and take them out because their utility is so good. Um, so
Uh,
they need to go deal with them, and you can put them in a place where they can deal with them, but it's going to cost them a lot to do it.
okay, so that's
Um,
where you could add to a unit that wants to die.
Yeah, exactly. So that's utility you can add to a unit that wants to die. Um,
Do you think our
Plague monks
priests would
are
work
also
there?
yep, yep, those work great. The old plague monk is also a great example of a unit that you want to die because they do three super awesome things when they die if you have both spells on them. Um, and they deal damage. So they do their role by like it's a bonus. It's just stacking bonuses.
Hmm.
Um,
And they're too big of a threat to ignore, like a lot of other things.
yep, and they're real good at dying. Like they're not hard to kill. So
And they're
plague
cheap.
monks were like, yeah, yeah, they were so perfect. I'm glad they changed them in part because it was really annoying to help your opponent follow through all the rules if they didn't understand them.
I think pretty
Uh,
much everyone was glad they changed.
yeah, and they were just not fun to play or play against. So, but yeah, um, so that's where I start looking at damage and utility. Um, the old wary fighter is a perfect example of utility. 10-man
Oh,
units of
yeah.
skinks are units you want to die. The opponent wants them to die because they're annoying, they're acting as speed bumps, and they just won't die. Like you can't kill them all at once because
Hmm.
one of them is going to wary fighter.
Yeah,
Um,
my old list was entirely just wary fighter.
yep,
200
yeah,
units with wary fighter. Bring it on.
yeah, yeah. Uh, so that's all a utility thing. Um, Other good utility is duplicitous host horrors. You can't retreat from them. That's great utility.
Yes,
Um,
it's why Zincher's one of the reasons why Zincher's just so powerful at the moment.
yep,
It's
yep,
a great don't die unit because it just has so many wounds.
yeah,
This is one that does Bone Splitters is another one like that. They don't survive because they have good save. They have survived because they have so many wounds.
hmm,
And then if you can't retreat from them, you're just stuck fighting them until you can
yeah,
kill them, which is one of the reasons why a lot of people have heavy hammers to deal with units like that.
yeah, yeah. And then for units that I want to stay on the table, that's frequently where I start looking for combos and synergies.
Mm.
Those are units that, generally speaking, I feel are going to be on the table long enough for me to be able to get some good combos going off of them. They don't always have to be that way. Seraphon's really lucky in that a lot of our combos are automatic. Um, so, for example, our Serpent Staff on the
Oh,
Skink
yep,
Star Priest, that's an automatic combo. We don't have to roll a dice, it just happens. If we're in range and you deploy correctly or whatever else, it's just going to happen. But if it's a combo that is an uncertain combo, like I need to get off a spell to get a 5+ exploding Nadirite weapon,
right,
uh, that's a combo that I want to, if I'm to put in an army, I want both parts of that combo to be able to stick to the table, either by denying access to them in the case of like the hero that's going to cast that spell,
right.
um, or having a unit that's durable enough that even if I don't get it off, next time it comes to my turn to try to do it, they should both still be on the table.
And that's another place where Seraphon excel. Even with those, the ones that cost stuff, we are really good at getting those off.
Yeah.
We
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of CP, not as much as people like to think, but we do have a lot of CP to work with.
Yeah,
We do need a lot of CP though, but
we do.
also our spells are so easy to get off.
I think where I find that Starborn struggles is that all of our battalions feel like attacks, with the exception of Sunclaw. Sunclaw does not feel like attacks in any way uh, for Starborn, but all the others feel like a bit of attacks. And I'm probably always running Fangs of Sotek or Dracothian's Tail, so getting that Aether Quartz brooch is a bit harder. So our CP is more constrained than it oftentimes will fill
Yeah.
from like the outside, like understanding how it's going to play on the table.
Hmm. And we have
Um,
to remember that our buffs have to go in both turns because we only buff for
yes.
a phase.
Yep. Uh, so yeah, in terms of blockers, I'm not normally looking like if they do damage or they do something else to me, that's all bonus.
Right.
Um, it's not normally going like if I'm looking at this is a grade A blocker and a grade B damage dealer, I'm taking that every day over a grade B blocker and a grade A damage dealer. Like I care most about its ability to block.
Right.
Um, So like bound Aether Void Pendulum. There's a lot of people on Lustria that have been asking, why would you ever take bound Aether Void Pendulum? And the answer is because you control when it moves. So if you stick it sideways in front of an enemy unit in a tight corridor,
Hmm.
you're going to drastically impede their movement. That's awesome. That is 100% worth 10 points to me
Or if you
over
put it
taking
in
the
front
regular.
of one of your units that doesn't want to die or is blocking, it makes them less likely to charge you.
Yeah, yeah.
It's great in
All those
area
things.
denial.
Yeah, all those things. Um, so that's sort of the blocking is what matters most.
Hmm.
So everything else is sort of secondary, but damage and utility is always what I'm like. Those things are the things I consider after I consider how I'm going to be scoring objectives. Um, because I find that a lot of times, if you're quick enough in movement, like pterodons, 16 inches,
The fastest
um,
unit in the game.
yeah, uh, doesn't matter that you're gonna kill them. Um, I'm gonna score objectives for 2 more turns than you are because I stopped you where you were standing. So I might not even have to take you off the table if I can keep you stuck on your side of the table. Um, Sometimes you have to be able to take a unit off. So
Hmm.
understanding when your army has to be able to kill something or when it doesn't is really important to unit selection.
And
Um,
it's a really difficult lesson to learn early on because
mhm.
when you think of an army, you think of killing somebody. This is one of the
Uh-huh.
big problems with orc players who could do a lot better than they do, but just want to smash things.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Knowing when to fight and when not to is really important.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, and if you can take a platform that's super quick, has a decent amount of wounds on it, um, can make a tight or broad footprint, uh, then you don't even have to get it onto an objective in order to prevent your opponent from being able to score objectives. Like you can just have it 16 inches away from them, and now they can't leave that objective because they can't move quick enough to have a reasonable charge against you.
Hmm.
And if they leave it, you'll just get right on it. Um, so understanding that type of play, like you might not have to kill a unit to deal with a unit. Um, like killing it's obviously the easier decision making to be able to determine. Like, oh yeah, kill it. This is how I kill it. Like that's a real easy way to play. You can basically play essentially algebraic chess, where you're like, my knight's worth 3 points and your rook's worth five, so I'll take that trade.
Hmm.
Like you can do that with Sigmar. It's relatively easy decision making. You're
And
like,
it's
how
how
many points
most
does
players
that unit
play.
cost? Okay, I'm going to try and kill it with a unit that costs less without losing it. Like
Hmm.
that's strong decision making in the early stages of learning the game. That's a great tool to use. Um,
And with some armies, even late stage, it depends on what you're playing.
yeah, yeah,
Like you
uh,
mentioned Beastclaw earlier. Seraphon and Beastclaw are the polar opposite of that. Always have been.
yes. So yeah, those are kind of the battlefield roles that I'm looking for. And then when I choose my heroes, it's always based around supporting whatever type of thing I want to do with that.
Right.
Sometimes I need to be able to kill stuff, so I'm like going to take whatever the equivalent of a smash captain is, and which is basically just a hero that's a missile, does a bunch of damage,
In our
whatever.
case, that would be the Carnosaurs guys.
Yeah, Carnosaurs. Uh, I think that's the only thing we have now. That makes me really sad. I was trying to think of another one that we have, but I mean,
Uh,
I guess you could do it with the Sunblood, but it's just not worth.
no, they die too quickly.
Yep.
All foot
Uh,
heroes die too quickly to fill that role.
yeah. Uh, and but normally when I'm making hero selections, I'm asking myself what spells do I want to be able to add to my army. Um, I feel like in the current meta, you always have to have a way to dispel. Um, so I'm always trying to fit in like what wizards do I want, what spells are on their war scroll that I want, what heroes provide utility that I need to bring.
And we're lucky in that
Because
regard. A lot of our heroes do that regardless.
yeah, yeah. And our skink heroes, like they got shooting attacks, like they're actually going to participate more than just buffing this time.
Yeah, not a
Um,
lot, but it's sometimes that little bit helps.
yeah, I mean, I've had games that I won or lost by a single model living or dying. Um,
Yeah, we all everyone who's played long enough against people who
yeah,
know
yeah,
what they're
you
doing
get that
have
to
had
happen.
that.
Yeah, so it all adds up, and it was basically free.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Because you're not
the
taking them
only
for that,
thing,
but
yeah, and the only thing that cost us more by getting it was our star priest. Uh, he went up 40 points,
that
but
that's
it
fair.
was merited.
Let's be honest, that's very fair.
Yeah,
He is
yeah,
worth 120 points.
yep, he is.
I
Uh,
don't think he's worth too much more than that because we need a lot of them.
yep. The last thing that I think is super important in list building and understanding how your units are going to work is you need to know whether or not you have to take the initiative with that unit for it to do its job.
Right.
If you
Whether
have to
you
be
have
the
to
one,
instigate or whether you have to force your opponent to do something they don't want to.
yep, or if it's got a short window of effectiveness, like if your plan is to, for whatever reason, if you're like, I'm going to run 24 pterodons in this list, and I'm going to do it because I want to deal a bunch of mortal wounds and then trap them in their deployment.
Okay, Mr.
The only
Moneybags.
way that's going to work is if you get to take the first turn,
Yes.
because otherwise they're not going to be in their territory. So understanding that type of a thing with list building uh, will determine whether or not you have to be low drop, high drop, all of that. Um, so that's the last thing I consider when list building is the build that I'm currently working on. Does this require me choosing the initial tempo? Do I have to win the drop game in order for this list to work? Um, and if that's the case, how many points do I have to spend to make that happen? Um,
Okay.
yeah, that calculus has gotten a lot harder for other armies lately because of the Zinch change host. Um, Before it used to be pretty easy to, I feel like, to make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in general, Seraphon doesn't have to make the decision because we're not winning drops.
Right. And
Um,
and to be honest, at this point, it's okay to take a loss in tournaments if your list does not match well against your opponent's list.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Play well,
there's some,
lose well. It's okay if you can't win them all, guys.
yeah, yeah. And there are some battle plans and battle tomes, like if it's X battle tome on X battle plan, where I just don't think we can win. Like, and that's important. You have to understand, like, you have to be able to look at the table and say, in order for me to win this, lightning has to strike
Mm-hmm.
because you need to know what lightning striking looks like so that you can set up and play and leave that opportunity for lightning to strike. Um,
Because this is a dice game.
yeah, it
The
happens.
best laid plans can fall to Lady Luck.
I have won games that I should not have won at events against incredibly skilled players with really good armies
Mm-hmm.
where they had all the advantages. And I was like, okay, in order for this to win, I need these things to happen. It's a super long shot. I'm going to set up and hope it happens. And it happened. I rolled an 18 on an Engine of the Gods. Um,
uh, not gonna happen anymore.
yeah, I know. It happened to me once though. I'm just glad it happened once before it went away. Played the Battle Tome for like over a year and a half at tournaments, the old one, and I had it happen to me once. Um,
You know, the first time I ever put my Engine of the Gods on the table, I rolled an 18 for the first roll I ever made.
that is amazing.
I'm gonna miss that one. I'm still taking her. I love my Duchess.
Nice. I it's grown on me. The Engine of the Gods. I'm still not a huge fan of it. Like I'll take it in games where I didn't have to pay money to play them.
Mm, definitely not the
Uh,
new game.
yeah, yeah.
Oh well.
So
So I think that covers the very basics of list
yep,
building. In the future, we're going to work more along the exact details, but I think that covers it for today.
already. Any outro? Did we have an outro planned? I feel like we talked about an outro.
Not to the best of my knowledge. Everyone is free to leave comments with questions in the comments below. We'll be willing to answer a good chunk of them next time round and in future videos.
Yeah, on YouTube or on Lustria. You can direct message us if you're on. Discord. You can direct message us through Discord, through Lustria, or in our podcast thread on Lustria or on your YouTube comments.
Mm-hmm. But beyond that, the wilds are calling me home. Thank you for talking
All
with
right.
me today, Wizard.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night.